Good evening, everyone, and welcome again to this edition of Meet America. We are going to be talking about whistleblower suppression by our government. President Obama had promised an open government, and obviously he's being suppressed himself. I wouldn't doubt it. Anyway, we have with us today the Government Accountability Project, a fabulous organization. I hope you all support it. You can go to the web. And we have the president of that organization today, Lewis Clark, and he's going to be speaking to us about this situation and what we can do. So thank you so much for watching. I'm Annie Griffin, your host. Welcome to our show. Lewis?
Yes.
Yes, welcome to our show.
It's great to be here.
Why don't you tell us what your organization is trying to accomplish here?
Well, the Government Accountability Project has been trying to help protect both corporate and government whistleblowers, and we've been trying to do this for the last 33 years here in Washington, D.C.
All right, and what kind of success have you been having since the Obama administration?
Well, it's a totally mixed bag. First of all, this administration has probably prosecuted more whistleblowers than any other administration, and that's an extraordinarily negative impact. On the other hand, in terms of non-national security whistleblowers, this administration has been the best administration in history. So that's a completely mixed bag.
Well,
yes, go ahead.
Why don't you explain a little bit what that means?
Well, first of all, in the area of national security, there is no sympathy whatsoever that we've discovered with this administration. I mean, it's absolutely as repressive as the Bush administration was on national security issues. And we have just gone through a horrific prosecution of one of our clients, and that's Thomas Drake, who blew the whistle on the National Security Agency. And he was charged with espionage and had to fight 10 felony counts against him. And after an ordeal that lasted 4 years, finally, the prosecution collapsed and the charges were dropped in terms of the felony charges. He did plead guilty to a minor misdemeanor of supposedly misusing a government computer, but nothing related to classified information, nothing related to whistleblowing on the National Security Agency.
Okay, so why don't you tell us a bit about his story? What happened to this man? How did it begin?
Well, it began with his support of other whistleblowers at the National Security Agency. So altogether there were 4 whistleblowers, and they blew the whistle on a computer system that the agency was attempting to implement. And the problems with, there were 3 major problems with that particular computer system. One is it essentially invaded the privacy of all Americans that it looked at. So it was in that sense it was unconstitutional, or in that sense it was invasion of privacy. Secondly, it was very costly, extraordinarily costly, and in fact it cost $1.3 billion before they canceled the program. And that was completely wasted. And the third thing, that it didn't work very well. It essentially gathered too much information, and for that reason it was never able to really separate the good information and the bad information, or I should say the useless information, and so therefore it just got bogged down. On top of that, there was an alternative to that system, which did not invade people's privacy, and it only would have cost anywhere that, somewhere in the neighborhood of $3 to $5 million, as opposed to $1.3 billion. I mean, it's an amazing story. And these 4 whistleblowers were blowing the whistle on that, and they went to the Inspector General of the Defense Department, which is exactly what they're supposed to do, and they went through this very long process of blowing the whistle on this system, and that was exactly what people are supposed to do. However, in the middle of that, of their whistleblowing, the FBI was investigating the leaking of classified information, or at least what they said was the leaking of classified information from the National Security Agency, and that was related to a New York Times article. It had nothing to do with these four people. However, in looking at, in doing that leak investigation to the New York Times, they discovered that these people had gone to the Inspector General office, and so they ended up raiding these homes, the homes of these four people, late at night, early in the morning, with armed, SWAT teams, breaking into their homes and taking, everything they could take out of the homes in terms of computers and documents and files. And after this invasion of their homes, they finally thought they found classified information in the home of Thomas Drake. As it turned out, the 5 documents that they said was classified had actually been declassified. But nevertheless, they charged him with supposedly misusing classified information, and they tried him as a spy, as opposed to someone who had just misused classified information. They actually went that further distance of saying that this person was a spy. So they had, and the trial was supposed to have occurred in June. However, the government's case just collapsed right on the eve of trial.
I mean, this does not surprise me. Was this under the Obama administration or the Bush administration?
Well, it definitely started under the Bush administration. There's no question about that. So what essentially happened is the Justice Department did not stop the prosecution and continue with the prosecution that had already started. However, I mean, it's our contention, or at least the contention of our national security program here at this project, and it's our contention that the Justice Department could definitely have stopped this prosecution, or the Obama administration could have stopped this prosecution, but chose not to do so.
Mm-hmm. So why don't you give us some other cases of whistleblowers, being prosecuted unjustly, and what we can do about it?
Well, there are other cases, that are going forward that we're not representing, and so I don't know the details of those cases sufficiently to say what people can do. I think that what we did in terms of the particular person, Thomas Drake, who we represented, is that we did a petition that we essentially put together 5,000. There were 5,000 people that signed that petition. We presented it to the Justice Department, and I don't know what impact that had on them. We did present it to them before their case collapsed, and but I can't talk about these other cases because I'm not the lawyer on those cases, and so I'm not sure what those people would want you to do.
Well, was Thomas Drake, was he given any compensation for this terrible invasion of privacy and terror that he had to experience being woken up by a SWAT team in the middle of the night? Is there any kind of justice, an apology from our government?
No, and absolutely not. I mean, I think that eventually we're going to probably petition that even this minor misdemeanor charge that he ended up pleading to should be that he should be that should be dropped from his record altogether. But but there certainly is no kind of compensation that anyone's considering in terms of our Justice Department. I mean, that unfortunately that is the system. If you're wrongfully prosecuted
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me, you know. It's this lack of apology, this rudeness. It has to be stopped. I mean, it's just terrible to do that to people, and it's totally against our Constitution. And I'd like to point out here, this has nothing to do with your organization, but my own personal opinion is that our government is rife with criminals. And what I mean by that, what I define criminals as, people who break the law. And what is the ultimate law of our land, folks? It's our constitutional amendments. And any judge, any lawmaker, any city manager, anyone who makes laws that erode our Constitution amendments is breaking that law, the ultimate law that holds our nation together and gives us the freedom we deserve. So when these people come into power that we vote, you know, congresspeople, senators, and, you know, representatives on the city level, on every level, when they start making these insidious laws that erode our Constitution, we have to say to them, if you do that, whether you're a judge or whoever, you're going to be taken out. That's it. You are going to be voted out. Boom. I mean, it has to be that way. And we have to be very strict about it because they have eroded our freedom to the point where they can bust into your house, do whatever they want, just on a whim that you are hiding drugs. I mean, that's the latest. Can you talk a little bit about that, Mr. Clark? About the latest judicial ruling that happened this summer where a judge said that if a police officer thinks that you're hiding drugs in your home and he hears scuffling behind the door, he can actually break in without a warrant. Were you aware of that?
Yeah, it's been, I mean, over the last 30, 40 years, there has been a steady eroding of what is essentially your Fourth Amendment rights, your rights, you know, against this kind of invasion of, you know, of your home, your car, your home. That has been a steady, you know, a steady movement. Another good example of this, if you recall, over the last 2 to 3 years, there was a fairly broad surveillance program that occurred by the communications industry, essentially cooperating with the federal government. Verizon was involved, AT&T was involved, at least whistleblowers from those companies came forward, and then the Bush administration, you know, it had compelled or at least put pressure on these companies to allow the government essentially access to their files, and then there was, you know, then the Bush administration was so worried about it, they actually proposed legislation that would provide immunity to these companies for having cooperated with the government. And Congress passed that immunity. So essentially you couldn't sue the telecommunication industry for having allowed the government access to their files without any kind of warrants whatsoever. And we did have whistleblowers on that. There was a promise that Congress made in the legislation that they would actually investigate the abuses, but that has never occurred. There's not been an effective investigation as to exactly what happened. You know, what kind of cooperation did the telecommunications industry have with the government? And we don't really know what that was, but they were nevertheless given immunity.
And so even to this day, we do not know what these companies are doing with our privacy, right? Even though they have privacy acts and all that. So it's all sort of a facade. These people are doing illegal acts. They're getting away with it. And we, the American people, have to stand up and say, you know, if you're going to make these kind of mistakes, you're going to pay, because they certainly make you pay. You know, and so they need to pay as well. And I think, you know, I don't know, we're losing our rights so quickly. One of my big issues is the homeless, that they are criminalizing the homeless. And why this is so dangerous, folks, is during Hitler's time, what he did is he targeted the Jews. And he said, oh, they're very, very hard on the economy. We need to remove them, and we're going to remove them to camps, and they need to be out of Germany. And he targeted a sector of the population, and that is exactly what this government is doing. It's doing all the things that my father warned me about as a child. And my father happened to be one of those that filmed the war in World War II. And he was with George Stevens, and that's what they did. They filmed the war. He went to Dachau, and it changed, I mean, it just ruined his life. But he always warned me from 12 years old, when I saw piles of bodies, you know, up to the roof of dead people. He warned me to be careful of any government that starts to take too much control and power. And that is what's, in my opinion, happened to this government. It is a shadow government. It doesn't have to tell you anything, and yet it can prosecute you for anything. It's gone that far. And I'm so glad for the Occupy movement, because hopefully it's not going to die. And this is going on worldwide. There's 6,000 Occupy people, 6,000. I had no idea. The corporate media won't report that. But I learned that Santa Cruz Occupy. 6,000 demonstrations going on all over this country. So, you know, the movement isn't dying, folks. It's getting bigger. And what would you say about all that? In your opinion, what is your opinion of what this government is turning into?
Well, what's really happening is it really does come down to the people who are watching your show, the people who are engaged in finding out exactly what's going on in terms of this country. These people need to get involved, because it's our government, and we have to get involved. We have to support others who have gotten involved and who are then suffering as a result. Whistleblowers being a good example. And so all those people who are standing up for the truth and justice, they need the support of, you know, the organized support and the individual support of essentially the citizens. And I think the beauty of the movement that you're describing is that people are realizing that they've got to be engaged, and they can't leave it to others. And I think that's an important movement. Mm-hmm. And you know, I think aspects of even the Tea Party movement has, you know, there are people in the Tea Party movement who are doing the same thing. I don't agree with probably most of them in terms of how they interpret their, you know, what is happening in the country. So I'm sure we have disagreements on that. But nevertheless, I do think it's important that people become engaged, and they cannot leave it to others, and they certainly can't leave it to the government without that kind of engagement and oversight, because otherwise there's going to be no check on that kind of power. And certainly as it becomes more and more possible for the government to control information, then I think this is even dangerous.
Well, you know, these whistleblowers are absolutely heroic. Imagine you have a job, you have children, you have a family, and you risk everything. Yeah. Everything. And you risk it for your country, you risk it for your children's future, you risk it for everyone. And then you have Americans that don't do anything. I mean, and then you wonder why we're in the situation we're in. It's only going to get worse, folks, because they have 800 FEMA camps available that are empty and ready to go. And whether you want to believe it or not, guess what? They didn't believe it in Hitler's time, did they? You know, and I believe that Hitler's regime is alive and well in this country. And I love America. I'm fighting for it. I'm sticking my neck out, and I'm telling you, I'm warning you all out there. And I expect to get taken down anytime, you know. But I think that at what point are we going to be taken down anyway? I mean, did you see how they pepper sprayed those policemen, pepper sprayed those innocent, beautiful people trying to stand up for your country, trying to take back the terrible corruption that's going on? Can you explain, do you know anything about Ben Bernanke's past? Because he's now the chairman of our Federal Reserve, and I know he was in 2004 when he allowed the subprime rates to, you know, be rated by Stanley & Poor at AAA, and he did nothing to stand up for our country and misled people. What do you think of this man? How do you feel, and do you know anything about him?
Well, I certainly don't have chapter and verse about the criticism of him. I will say this, is that one of the important developments over the last year has been the whistleblower provisions in the Dodd-Frank Wall Street reform legislation, which does allow protections for whistleblowers, and also it reworked the whistleblower protections that were in the Sarbanes-Oxley Act that was originally passed in 2002, and that's for corporate whistleblowers. And I do think that's an important development. I do think we have the elements there for people on Wall Street to step forward and talk about what's going on in terms of our financial, world. And and there are whistleblowers in the banking industry who are beginning to come forward. So I do think that there are some important developments that are beginning to happen, and I'm hoping that we'll know more information about who all the players have been in terms of, obviously, what has led to the financial meltdown, which has already occurred and which seems to be continuing, including today's drop in the market. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately,
you have to go.
Thomas Drake is getting the Samuel Adams Award tonight, which is in recognition of his whistleblowing, and also the head of our National Security Program, Jesselyn Raddick, who also was a whistleblower on the Department of Justice, going back to 2001, and they're getting an award tonight, so I've got to rush to that event. But thank you for this opportunity to speak to you and to speak to your listeners and watchers, I guess. And I look forward to having this opportunity again at some point.
And thank you so much for what you're doing. Really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you for all you're doing.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Well, folks, GAP, Government Accountability Project, I hope that you will go to their website, donate. If you have 1,000 people and they donate $1, that's $1,000. If you have them donate $10, well, then there's $10,000. So you don't have to donate a lot to keep these wonderful organizations going, to keep the accountability alive and well in our country. And I want to end this program by saying what I love most about America is that we can still speak up, and we can still bring you this information. And I hope that you all out there will work on some very important issues. One is we need a third party in this election process, and we need to bring back our hand counts. And they will tell you that they can't do this, but don't believe them. It's amazing what can be accomplished when the American people really want it to happen. An electric electronic vote count is a secret count, and so we'll never really know who got elected. And that's been proven time and time again by the computer experts of this world. I suggest everyone go to blackboxvoting.org to find out the whole story on that. And so I'm going to leave you with some notes from the Occupy movement. And I want to thank you so much for watching. And what you can do about helping whistleblowers and making our government more accountable is by going to the GAP, the Government Accountability Project.org, and also asking your senators and representatives to co-sponsor the Whistleblower Protection Enhancement Act. And there's your representatives, oops, there's your telephone number for that. That's the Congressional Switchboard, and you can ask for your senator and your congressperson. If you don't know who they are, you just have to give your zip code and they'll put you through to their office. So it's very important that we do what we can, and part of that is watching programs like this and getting involved. That's what's going to make our country great or bring it down. Thanks so much for watching. I'm Annie Griffin, your host.
This movement isn't about the 99% defeating or toppling the 1%. You know the next chapter of that story, which is that the 99% create a new 1%. That's not what it's about. What we want to create is the more beautiful world our hearts tell us is possible, a sacred world, a world that works for everybody, a world that is healing, a world of peace. You can't just say, we demand a world of peace. Demands have to be specific. Anything that people can articulate can only be articulated within the language of the current political discourse. And that entire political discourse is already too small. And that's why making explicit demands kind of reduces the movement and takes the heart out of it. And so it's a real paradox. And so I think that the movement actually understands that. The system isn't working for the 1% either. You know, if you were a CEO, you would be making the same choices they do. The institutions have their own logic. Life is pretty bleak at the top, too. And all of the baubles of the rich, they're kind of this phony compensation for the loss of what's really important. The loss of community, the loss of connection, the loss of intimacy, the loss of meaning. Everybody wants to live a life of meaning. And today, we live in a money economy where we don't really depend on the gifts of anybody, but we buy everything. Therefore, we don't really need anybody, because whoever grew my food or made my clothes or built my house, well, if they died or if I alienate them, if they don't like me, that's okay. I can just pay somebody else to do it. And it's really hard to create community if the underlying knowledge is we don't need each other. So people kind of get together and they act nice, or maybe they consume together. But joint consumption doesn't create intimacy. Only joint creativity and gifts create intimacy and connection. You have such gifts that are important. Just like every species has an important gift to give to an ecosystem, and the extinction of any species hurts everybody. The same is true of each person. That you have a necessary and important gift to give. And that for a long time our minds have told us that maybe we're imagining things, that it's crazy to live according to what you want to give. But I think now, as more and more people wake up to the truth that we're here to give, and wake up to that desire, and wake up to the fact that the other way isn't working anyway, the more reinforcement we have from people around us that this isn't crazy, this makes sense, this is how to live. And as we get that reinforcement, then our minds and our logic no longer have to fight against the logic of the heart, which wants us to be of service. This shift of consciousness that inspires such things is universal in everybody, 99% and 1%, and it's awakening in different people in different ways. I think love is the felt experience of connection to another being. An economist says that essentially more for you is less for me, but the lover knows that more for you is more for me too. If you love somebody, then their happiness is your happiness. Their pain is your pain. Your sense of self expands to include other beings. That's love. Love is the expansion of the self to include the other. And that's a different kind of revolution. There's no one to fight. There's no evil to fight. There's no other in this revolution. Everybody has a unique calling. And it's really time to listen to that. That's what the future is going to be. It's time to get ready for it and to help contribute to it and make it happen.
You're watching the pepper spraying of the students that happened yesterday. This is so cowardly of our police. They dress in these enormous robotic zoot suits to threaten and paralyze its people. And look at how they're armed, and we're not allowed to be armed too. We use nonviolence, and that's their cowardly response, dressing up like monsters. And it's got to stop. So, and it is going to stop. The American people won't put up with it. Or if you do put up with it, then we're finished. We're finished as a nation. And I hope all you people that are watching in hotel rooms and motel rooms in our area, I want you to take this footage back to your country and say, this is free America. You know, this is free America. This is how they try to suppress us and stop us from the very legitimate complaint of the utter corruption that has infiltrated our government and the criminals that run our government, of which there are so many. It is like a rotted, fetid animal. And we can only hope that the new sprouts, the new shoots that come from that rotted, fetid animal are going to be strong enough, like a great oak, to finally bring on a really loving, wonderful world. And these policemen will refuse to do this kind of dishonor to its people and to itself. It's inexcusable, and they are part of the criminals for doing it. They are the ones that are eroding our civil rights, and no good policeman should allow themselves to be put in that position. They should say, I will not wear anything that is going to be anything more than what the protesters are wearing. And it's just a height of cowardness to be dressed that way. It's unconscionable behavior, and really it must stop. So I hope that you'll spread the word that America is not free. It is not any more free than any other country. And I guess that's why it's a world occupation. It's a world occupation. So call your senators and your congressional people and let them know how you feel about this atrocity, and introduce bills that are going to say that these policemen need to dress down, and they do not need these weapons, and they do not need to pepper spray these civilians that come in innocence and in true protest of the horrors that are taking place in this country, and the 1%ers that are stealing from everyone, including the police. If you don't do this, mark my words, we will not have anything left of our Constitution. You are watching it being taken away as we speak. Now here you see the police receding, and that is a good thing, because they know in their hearts that these people are protesting because they're angry. They have grievances against a criminalizing of our justice system, of our in every facet of government, and they need to join us. That's what they need to do, and it's important that everyone joins this movement and demands that these Ben Bernankes that brought down our country are put in jail, not in the highest control of government, like chairman of the U.S. Treasury. It's absurd. It's insane. Welcome to Meet America, everyone. I'm Annie Griffin, your host, and we are in Oakland at the Oakland protest that's going on. And we're going to be talking to one of the protesters. What do you think has to happen in America in order for this to be effective?
Well, thank you for interviewing me. I think we're going to have to shut commerce down because everything else has seemed to fail, whether it's stopping all these unnecessary wars or crimes against humanity, all these austerity measures imposed upon the working class by the bankers and the big capitalist organizations and companies and the super rich. We're going to have to just, like I say, have a general strike of all commercial workers. The only people I'd keep working are doctors, nurses, dentists, veterinarians, firefighters, and the police, as long as they don't get rowdy with the protesters. But the only way you're going to resolve something, we've signed millions of petitions, letters to the editor, called our congressmen and women, and wrote to the White House and everything else. We've got nothing to show for it, but a lot of heartaches and a lot of anxiety. So most successful changes in society have come through worker action, and our labor.
An example of that?
Yes. You had the general strike in Seattle, Washington in 1919. They shut the city down until they got their rights for the workers, for labor, which you don't even hear about anymore. Right here in Oakland, you had the general strike of 1934 when they were messing with the longshore workers that spread across the bay to San Francisco. You had strikes in the 1930s, especially in Detroit and the automobile industry, where you actually had sit-downs where the workers locked themselves in factories at Ford and General Motors and everything until they were able to get collective bargaining agreements. Even more importantly, I think, is the general strike in Iran to get rid of that the dictatorship of the Shah, of Pahlavi. It started with the workers in the oil fields, and then the strike actually spread to people in the cities, in Tehran and other parts of the country. Everybody walked off the job, school teachers, you name it. And before you know it, he left the country. And I'm not saying the Ayatollah was any better, but at least the people did get rid of him and the Savak regime. You know, they're secret police that the CIA trained and funded over the decades. So,
and Gandhi.
And Gandhi. Oh, even before that, Gandhi in India against the British rule. I mean, they shut down the country literally. So, workers, especially in the United States, have low self-esteem and are easily manipulated. And our real power is our labor, because nobody can function without the working class. Not Bill Gates, not Warren Buffett, not the Rockefellers, DuPonts, the Walton family. And I've come to the conclusion after all these protests, there's 7 magic words. Take to the streets, withhold your labor, peacefully.
Okay, Oakland Occupy on December 12th, 2011. And as you can see, it's a mulling beehive
outside the port.
Outside the port, and they've managed shutting down the port and the trucks. And that's what it's all about. The Occupy movement is about shutting down commerce all over the United States, so that finally they listen to us.
What have you guys been here?
I've been here for about 2 minutes. I've been sitting here. I got here today at 4. We marched here. I was a part of the bicycle stuff. Mike.
We have a TV program in Santa Barbara, San Luis Obispo, Monterey counties, and some other places, and we're doing some live shots. Then we're going to edit it later, even though it's funky. Are you guys from around here? From where? Berkeley? Oakland?
Never mind.
There was on November 2nd, on the general strike, November 2nd, there was about 15,000 to 20,000 people that marched into this port. And the corporate media reported that there was 3,000 people.
Oh yeah, corporate media. Yeah.
Just like they reported when 700 people got arrested in front of the or on the Brooklyn Bridge. They reported. I read one source said 200. Yeah. Another source, a lot of them said 500, but it was 700. Right. One of the largest mass arrests in U.S. history.
Isn't that amazing? Yeah. Well, that's corporate media for you, and more and more people are beginning to call it the laughing stock.
Amy Goodman, man, Democracy Now!
Yeah, Amy's marvelous.
Amy Goodman.
Yeah, she's so good. And KPFA.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I really, seeing everything like...
We're right outside
I was right outside of Ochi Plaza. I remember the date when we got tear gas like 3 or 4 times.
Oh, really?
I got tear gas 3 times.
Oh my God.
And then I left after the 3rd time.
Oh my God.
It was that time, you know.
Oh yeah. Yeah, you can get blinded by that.
I got sick for a few weeks afterwards. Like
sure.
I felt very toxic and stuff.
And why did they tear gas you?
Yeah, that was a wild thing. It was completely unprovoked. They said that we were an unlawful assembly.
Oh, unlawful.
Yeah,
all of a sudden our free speech is unlawful.
They said it was an unlawful assembly.
And where were you assembling that it was unlawful?
Well, we were right outside. We were trying to get into the park, but they wouldn't let us. So
the park is a public place, isn't it?
So we were around, I would say, 1,000 people were in an intersection. And
we should get like an all blue.
Yeah, just tear gassed us out of nowhere. That's the day Scott Olson was hit in the head with the tear gas.
Right. Yeah.
It was the day they took the. It was the day that they took the park away the first time. When they raided the park.
Oh right. Yeah.
And we tried to take it back later on that day. We congregated at the library around 5 o'clock, 4 to 5, and then we tried to march back into the park, and they wouldn't let us, and that's when they tear gassed us.
Well, the rest of the world is watching America and Americans going through what we're going through, and they're beginning to realize that our government is not interested in human rights or freedom or justice, and that they are the Nazis revisited.
As long as they can give us just enough to keep us comfortable, we can remain apathetic and not do things like this.
Well, I guess the Americans aren't, especially the young, because what future do you have?
Well, you know, as long as they have 16 and pregnant on MTV, I don't think I'll be in Maury, whose dad is it anyways, or who's the real father. I mean, things like that the media uses as divisive tactics to keep people distracted.
Right.
You know?
Right.
Manufacturing consent.
Yeah.
I mean, look at what's on the news right now. Herman Cain's affairs. They're not showing this. They didn't show the occupation, Wall Street, until 2 weeks after they had already occupied. And that Anderson Cooper could have walked 2 blocks to report on it, but nobody touched it until those women got tear gas or maced.
Right.
That's when they started talking about it a little bit more and more. But I mean, Keith Olbermann's pretty much the only consistent mainstream person who's like had constant coverage. Same with what's her name on MSNBC, Rachel Maddow. And I don't like either of them, but they've had some decent coverage.
Yeah, well, you know,
Rachel Maddow's been very supportive. She's from Oakland.
Yeah.
She's from East Oakland.
Yeah. Well, keep up the good work.
Oh, yeah, thank you.
You know?
For years I contacted him so the cell phone went dead. But I'd love to have him on camera.
Yeah, and you're defending him now.
Small thing.
No, he's not defending the
I'm here to stand in solidarity with some of the Occupy movements that are here right now and some of the workers that are choosing to strike. I want to learn more about what's going on exactly with the labor dispute, but I do know that with this Occupy movement, we've been standing up for the right to feed each other, shelter each other, give each other medical attention, basically take care of one another and perform direct democracy in the streets, and the state has repeatedly squashed us. Now they're arresting us just for having sleeping bags, not even tents anymore, and things are just getting really out of control. Occupy SF is getting raided every single night. We don't even have tents at this point. We're still getting raided on the basis of anti-lodging laws, on top of a number of other things. So.
Well, you know, it's interesting. You know where this all came from, this anti-camping law? It
where's that?
Well, back in the early 80s, actually it was the early 70s, yeah, the early 70s. A health department official was putting signs all along Big Sur that no one could camp in their cars. And I said, well, what if people have to fall asleep while they're driving? And he said, yeah, I know. And he said it was coming from the hotel, motel industry.
Crazy.
So again, corporations, you see, they you know, but the
money drive.
Yeah. And so I'm glad you're taking back the streets and our parks because you know they're criminalizing us, and I equate this to Nazi Germany because my father fought in that war and warned me of the symptoms, and the symptoms are very clear. So one of them is that you can no longer, you know, sleep in your car. Well, that's ridiculous. Right. Sometimes you have to sleep in your car, you know.
Thank you.
And the parks are bought by us. So thank you.
We're gonna start planting.
Okay. My name is Brel, and
what would you like Congress to do that would make you not want to occupy anymore?
First of all, I think I don't know what would make me not want to occupy anymore, because I think continuing the general sentiment of occupation is really promoted a lot of positive change in this country. But I think reinstating Glass-Steagall would be really a great first step, and I think having a tax code that wasn't just based on income tax, but that had a more progressive tax in terms of hedge fund managers and people who are making just unheard of amount of money and not getting taxed, and it's just not fair.
Right.
So I think those are some really basic things that are really concrete that I think everybody in this movement stands behind. I don't think there's anybody who doesn't stand behind that, and when people say that, oh, there's no concrete message, I think it's just media propaganda, because there obviously is some really concrete messages.
Right. So why are you here?
Why am I here?
Yeah.
Well, I'm occupying. I want to shut down the ports, and I want to send a message to the 1% and to all entities that are corrupt in this country and in the world. It's all about taking a stand and demanding something different than what we have been subjected to for our entire lives.
Do you love animals?
Of course I love animals.
Did you hear that they just removed the Moran Amendment, which now gives $5 million of our tax dollars a year to slit the throat of our companion horses?
I have not heard that.
Yeah, that's where our taxes are going to go. That's how they're cutting the deficit. Isn't that just something unbelievable? Here they're talking about cutting the deficit, and yet $5 million a year now are going to go towards horse slaughter, to inspect horse meat in this country, which we don't even eat.
I am not aware of that, but at this point, nothing surprises me.
Yeah.
Every day there's some piece of information that is disturbing to me. So that's something that I will have to do a little research on later.
Okay, go and
Let me find out what time it is.
because this is really, it's a movement. People are getting fed up, folks. And we're trying to be nice about it. But there's a lot of people here that are willing. They've already been pepper sprayed and hurt, and they're not going to go away. So that's probably why the Senate just passed the National Defense Authorization Act, so the military can put everyone in jail and arrest them and detain them as long as they want. So the rest of the world, be aware of what this government's doing to its people, and go to your country and defend yourselves against what this militarization of the freest country on earth is becoming.
My name is Laura Wells, and I ran as the Green Party candidate for governor in 2010. And so as a reward, they arrested me outside of a gubernatorial debate in San Rafael and told me I didn't belong there, arrested me for trespassing at a private party. And what we're going to do is we're going to open up this private party. And what Occupy movement is doing is occupying and decolonizing the entire country. And it won't stop. People sometimes say, well, do you think it'll continue? Yes, it will continue. And what I'm really excited about is the idea that the strong social movement in combination with an electoral movement where we can get people in power who will call off the police and who will not raise the tuition and who will tax the rich. When I ran as a governor, the main focuses that I have as in my Green Party work and campaign work is a state bank for California, so it's publicly owned and the wealth of California stays in California. A bank, it partners with credit unions and local banks, makes good loans to students, homeowners, small businesses. The interest is smaller that gets paid, but the interest that's paid, that's paid comes back to California to invest here, not Wall Street, and forget the Fed, you know. And so that's one thing. And the other thing
I want to add here that also I think it's very important, and I hope you push for this, a bill in Congress that forbids any kind of contributions going to any single senator or congressperson during, after, or before their tenure, that all that money that any corporation or organization or individual wants to give has to go into an electronic election pool, and they do not know who's giving them the money. It's the only way we're going to keep these people honest, and we're only human, and when we get that kind of money thrown at us, it's very hard to resist, and so that is what has to happen. And also I'd like your...
Hi, I'm Richard, and I was at this morning's shutdown at Port of Oakland on December, what is today, the 12th? Yes. It went very smoothly, it was very successful, and the turnout was wonderful.
How many people would you estimate?
Well, when we got to West Oakland BART, that got shuttled over, that was about 200 people there, same as the police or the Chronicle estimated. It seemed about 200, but of course once we got down to the actual site, it was much greater numbers. And people were very committed. The truckers were supporting us with their honks. There was no obscene gestures being made to any of us that I saw. There was a little bit of veiled hostility, a tiny bit, but no swearing, no bad language, no disrespect on anyone's part, and that's a good sign. And so if it stays along this mode, and if people stay determined, I think we can make a difference. It's going to take time, like with movements in the past. It's going to take time, and we have to be patient, and not everyone is as patient as the next person. But we have to be careful because the other side is organized and very deep funded. So, 'twas ever thus. So that's kind of my 2 cents there.
Okay.
All right.
And